How many of you have ever seen God do a miracle or seen a miracle happen? Can I see your hands? And I'm not talking just like, I mentioned earlier salvation is like the biggest miracle of all, and I really believe that. It is. But have you said, I have seen God do a miracle? Have you seen, can I see your hands again? That's incredible. That's awesome. That's wonderful. We like that. We like to talk and tell the stories when cool things and big things happen. Are you familiar with the name George Mueller? Anybody? George Mueller was a Christian evangelist. He was the director of the Ashley Down Orphanage in Bristol, England. And he had this calling on his life to care for orphans, but he made this unusual commitment. He said, I'm going to care for orphans, but what I'm going to do is I'm never going to ask people for money. I'm never going to manipulate people's emotions, and I'm never going to apply pressure to people to get them to give. I'm simply going to pray, and I'm going to trust God. And then one morning, the orphanage had zero food at all on the table. And the kids were all sitting there, and Mueller instructed them, sit down like you're going to eat a meal. I know it's not there, but I want you to begin to thank God as if it was already in front of you. And so that's what the kids did. Looking at nothing, believing in a big God, they sat down and they just began to thank the Lord for provision that He gave them. Moments later, there's a knock at the door, and a baker stood there, and he said, the Lord had impressed me last night to get up, and I felt a burden that this orphanage would need bread, and he's carrying baskets and baskets of bread that he stayed up all night to fix, and there it was. And if that wasn't enough, just a little bit after that, there was a milk cart going by that broke down, and the guy on the cart realized by the time the cart was repaired, this milk would be spoiled, so he went in and gave it to the orphanage. And there they are in this moment with nothing, and they believe God, and God brings bread, and God brings milk, and that's awesome, right? That's wonderful. And stories like that began to happen repeatedly on the onset of his ministry. Anonymous donations would appear at the exact moment that they were needed. Supplies that were desperately needed would arrive in a moment. Financial needs would be met within hours of making desperate prayers. Of course, you know, if you've heard of George Mueller, you've probably heard of all these things, right? These are what people like to talk about. These are the illustrations that pastors like to give because they're encouraging and because they're dramatic. And I've been preaching through Joshua, right? So it's like the Jericho moment. That's what these are. These big, huge walls falling, visible evidence, immediate answers. These are the stories that we like to tell. What happened with George Mueller is eventually he cared for over 10,000 orphans during his lifetime, and he oversaw enormous organizational responsibilities. And honestly, the work became less dramatic and more just daily grind. That's what it became. And there were still answers to prayer, but it wasn't the big, spectacular, walls falling kind of dramatic moments. Sometimes they came weeks and weeks later instead of minutes later. Sometimes there were exhaustive administrative burdens. Sometimes it just felt like daily routine. Sometimes the emotional excitement of the miracle stories faded. And what happened is the ministry shifted from surviving one miraculous meal at a time to decades of faithfulness, of sustained faithfulness. Early on, God would work in Mueller's ministry through these incredible visible interventions. And later, it was more through endurance, consistency, wisdom, structure, and a lot of quiet provision. And what it is sometimes we interpret these quieter seasons as abandonment. Sometimes we interpret when God's not doing the big things, that maybe he's just not on the scene anymore. But God had not left Mueller. God was teaching him a bigger kind of trust. And even after his ministry has seemed to have lost like this wow factor that we all like to look at the beginning of his ministry and tell, there's not a lot of stories we share at the latter end because it's just the daily grind. Even after all these years, he's quoted saying this, "Answers to prayer have been continued for me for 49 years and 4 months without one single day's interruption." That's pretty good. Anybody can celebrate when the milk cart breaks down outside of the orphanage. But it takes mature faith to celebrate when things just look ordinary, when things just look plain. And the thing is, one of the hardest moments in a believer's life, it has been in mine, is when you feel like God is just not moving like he used to. I'm not seeing the things in my life in this moment like I have in a previous moment. God, what's wrong? I love the Jericho moments, don't you? When you shout, when walls fall down, when miracles happen, when we have powerful worship, when there's obvious breakthroughs, when there's manifestations of the presence of the Lord. But what happens when we walk into a season when these things just aren't happening like we expected or even want or desire? What happens when we walk through a season when our confidence gets shaken or when fear rises? Honestly, when God feels quiet. Have you been there? You're praying. I love it when God does big things. But being able to sit when it's silent, when you're not hearing an answer, when you're not seeing that prayer immediately answered, when that thing you're hoping for, it's like there's, God, are you even with me? We've all felt that. Joshua faced that. I've been reading through, and he leaves Jericho, and then he encounters the battle of Ai. And there's something that Joshua learns. I'm reading through this, looking at this, and there are several different things that I could preach out of this passage. And I know I'm kind of touching on what I've preached a little bit before, but there's so many things loaded up in here that are good things. But this is what I want to focus on. The God who is with you in dramatic manifestations is still with you in quieter seasons. So the first thing I want to ask is it okay to expect the visible moves of God? Yes. Is it okay to expect the visible moves of God? Yes, it is. It's a good thing. We serve the God of the impossible, don't we? Our God can speak things that don't exist. He can speak them into existence. It's okay to expect big and mighty things. Matter of fact, I've been told throughout preaching, I can't remember who said it. I just remember it was said, and it stuck with me. But you can tell how big you think God is by the size of your prayers. Do you serve a big God? Then why do we pray these, and this isn't the sermon, but why do we pray these little tiny bitty prayers as if it's a big deal for him to answer? It's okay to expect big things. We serve a God of the impossible, a God that can make anything happen. That's the God that we serve, and yes, is it okay? It is okay to expect visible moves of God. Joshua, if you look throughout his life, he has seen all these visible manifestations of God's presence all throughout. He witnessed the plagues in Egypt, God's mighty hand. He witnessed the Passover miracle and the protection. He came to the Red Sea when he felt hopeless like everybody else, and he witnessed God do the impossible and make a way when there was no way. He saw God open up a rock and give them water when there was no water. He saw a pillar of fire and a cloud that literally led them in a loop through the wilderness. When they had no food to eat, he saw God create it like the dew on the ground and bring in quail when the bread wasn't enough. They wanted meat, and they brought in so much quail they didn't know what to do with it. It was Joshua who stood there and watched at Mount Sinai when God showed up in a mighty way, a holy way, and it shook the earth and it thundered and there's trumpets and the audible voice of God. It was Joshua who watched probably the first one to see Moses' face glowing when he came out of the presence of the Lord, because Joshua was always right there. Matter of fact, Moses would meet in the tent of meeting, and the cloud would descend, and the presence of the Lord was there, and Moses would go on, and guess what? Joshua would hang out. Joshua loved the presence of the Lord. He would stay nearby the presence because he loved the presence of the Lord. He loved the manifest presence of the Lord. He has seen God do some big, awesome, and mighty things, and so have we. We've seen God do some cool things. And then Moses, who is the man of God, they feared because he talked with God. And Moses was the man of God. And Moses calls everybody together, and he passes on some authority to Joshua and promotes Joshua in front of everybody. This is the leader now, the man of God, making this very public statement. And then Joshua is taking over for his mentor. And then Joshua begins to give the Lord begins to give Joshua some assurance. I'm going to turn to Joshua chapter 1 just to kind of go back to what the Lord spoke to him. This is from the first sermon I preached a while back, but it's crucial. I'm going to read the first 9 verses as a recap. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, just as I promised Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea towards the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, and you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and be courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Those sound like pretty encouraging words. He has seen the mighty hand of God do some incredible, wonderful things, and now he's promoted, and God says, look. And we just read what he told him. Very, very encouraging words. And then what do we see? Then he's faced with this flooded Jordan River. And what's he going to do? He's remembering these words. And God has always shown up before. And he said, Lord, you said like you were with Moses, you're going to be with me. I've seen you do some awesome things with Moses. And I believe you're going to do some awesome things with me. And he goes and he seeks the Lord. And the Lord tells him, hey, take the ark, go put it in the water and watch what happens. And he did. And the waters were held back. And they all crossed on dry ground. Incredible. And then they recommit themselves to the Lord. And then here's this walled city, this great fortified city of Jericho. And God says, hey, no problem. We got this. I got this. You're walking with me. It's going to be okay. And I need you to just take some laps around this, shout a little bit, blow a trumpet, and watch and see what I'm going to do. And they did. And what did God do? He came down and bam, lowered them all, smashed down the walls of Jericho, and they had this great victory. Everything in Joshua's life is reinforcing this. God is with you. But there is a danger. The danger is this. In life, it's dangerous if we only recognize God through the manifestations. We can begin measuring His presence only by what we see happening. And that's not a safe place to be. There's a lesson we can learn, I believe Joshua learned. It's this: God doesn't always reveal himself in the same way. He doesn't always do it the same. Sometimes we can easily observe how God is moving. It's very visible. And other times, like I said, it seems like this season is God with me. Has God gone silent? Times we can see him working, and there's other times we wonder if he's there at all. Let me ask you this. What if it feels like God isn't present? What do we do? Look at Joshua 7, verse 2 through 5. Again, to recap, he's had this great, wonderful moment. Now here to the battle of Ai. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel. And he said to them, go up, spy out the land. And the men went up and they spied out Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said to him, don't have all the people go up. Let 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not make the whole people toil up there, for they are few. So about 3,000 men went up there from the people, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai killed about 36 of their men and chased them before the gate as far as the cherubim and struck them at the decent. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So Joshua sent these spies. Hey, man, everything in his life, God is with me. God is with us. We've seen him do these incredible things. And they had all these victories. And the water split for Joshua. And the walls fell for Joshua. And now he's sending soldiers to Ai. He said, go spy it out. They go up there and say, hey, this is no problem at all. We've seen God do some incredible things. This is nothing. They came back very confident. Say, don't even send everybody. It's not a big deal. Don't make all the people go up there. And what happens is these 3,000 men go up and they are chased down, and some of them are dying. And now this army who was so confident because God has always done these great and miraculous things, they're melting. They're sad. They're scared. Ai was supposed to be easy. That was an easy victory. Jericho was impossible. Ai was small. This is no big thing. Joshua, I'm sure, expected just an easy victory. Hey, no problem. Instead, again, Israel runs, men die, fear spreads, confidence collapses. Suddenly Joshua, I would assume, if I were in his shoes, begins to feel something unfamiliar. God, what happened? What on earth just happened? God, you always show up big. Where were you this time? Look at verse 6 through 9. And then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until evening, he and the elders of Israel. And they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say when Israel has turned their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it and will surround us and cut off our name from all the earth. And what will you do for your great name? Does that sound like a man that's confident in what the Lord is doing? Joshua begins to question. He encounters something he's not familiar with, this taste of defeat, this taste of God, where you at? God didn't move the way Joshua expected it to go down. And he asked God, where were you? Why didn't you show up? Joshua begins to question, not because he was questioning his love for the Lord. He didn't stop loving God. Just, he thought he had God figured out on how God was going to do it. I mean, at least that's what I do sometimes. And I end up disappointed because God didn't do it the way I thought it should be done. But I was confident in this. What happened? Joshua had become accustomed to these dramatic demonstrations of God's power, and now suddenly there's no collapsing walls, there's no supernatural display, there's no obvious manifestation. And when the manifestation disappeared, Joshua momentarily began to struggle to recognize the presence of God. It seems like God went quiet in the moment when he was in need. You know, when you were in school and you had to take a test. Of course, in class, you could raise your hand in class and the teacher would call on you and you could ask any question and the teacher would answer your question. But during the middle of a test, if you raise your hand and you ask, hey, teacher, I don't know the answer to number 3. Any good teacher is not going to give you the answer of the test. Am I right? Why? Because the teacher has already given you that information. And they feel confident to know that you have retained that information. Now it's time to see. The silence of the teacher, if you have a question in the test, isn't abandonment. But the silence is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to remember what you've already been taught. So, when you feel like God is silent, when you feel like God is absent, don't panic. Perhaps this is a moment that you can look back on what God has already spoken and let that come out. Joshua's panicking. He's freaking out. And when I read it anyway, in my version, as I'm looking at what he's doing, falling on his face, it's a panic to me. But God had already spoken to him. That's why I read chapter 1. What did he already tell Joshua? I'll be with you. I'm not going to forsake you. Don't fear. Don't be dismayed. God hasn't changed one bit. Joshua simply needed to remember what God had already spoken. And it's the same in our lives at times. There's quiet seasons. There's times that we feel like we're just not hearing the Lord or not seeing. That's not proof that the Lord has left. Remember, it's opportunities to look back in what he has spoken. I want to ask you this question too. Is God there even if we don't see him act? Is he there? Even if we don't see him act. Yes. Look at verse 10. This is the Lord's response. The Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Get up. You're seeking me as if you don't recognize that I'm right here with you. Get up. Do you think because I didn't do a miracle that I'm absent from you? Get up." Joshua's laying there wondering if God's even there, and God is speaking to him. That alone tells you he's there, am I right? The same God who brought down Jericho walls is the same God who begins to give Joshua a strategy on how to overcome Ai. Jericho was this miraculous manifestation, but Ai was going to be a strategic obedience. But both victories came from God. Look at chapter 8, verse 1 and 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear, and do not be dismayed." Sounds like we've heard that before. Sounds like the Lord is reminding Joshua, what did I tell you already? You're wondering where I am. You're wondering why I didn't show up. What have I already told you? You wonder if I'm here. What have I told you already? It says, and the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear, do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and arise and go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hands the king of Ai and his people, his city and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoils and its livestock you shall take as plunder for yourselves. Lay an ambush against the city behind it." God is reminding Joshua, what I've told you before is still true today. Even if you don't see it working, I'm at work. It's like he's telling Joshua, you believe me when you see the walls falling of a city, but when you don't, you question my involvement. I feel like I've been in that situation. The same God who brought the Jericho walls down in his might is the same God that uses strategy and victory through Joshua's might. And as you read through the rest of chapter 8, you see that Joshua went and they laid this ambush and they used their swords and they defeated Ai in their might through God's strategy. But here's the thing, just because God didn't do it doesn't mean God's not in it. Sometimes we want God to do all the work, and sometimes he wants us to do some work, and he's with us, and he'll instruct us. There's at times that he does the work, and there's times that he does the work through us. But what happens is sometimes we feel like, God, if you were really with me, I would feel more confident here. If I could just see you, then I would know. Is there any faith in that? Lord, if I could just see it, then I would sure have the faith. Is seeing faith? Or does lack of seeing and believing sound more like faith? We're told we don't walk by sight. We walk by faith. We don't have to see it to know. But we say things like, God, if you were really doing something dramatic here, then I would know. God, if you were just doing this great move, this revival across our sanctuary, then I would know that you are pleased with our church. Then, Lord, if you just bring do this for my kids or do this for my spouse or all these stipulations, we want to see God do this mighty thing, and then. But mature faith learns this, that God is just as present in whispered directions as he is in shaking mountains. I don't know who said this, but I liked it also. Sometimes God moves mountains, and sometimes God gives you a shovel, right? Either way, the mountain can get moved. Either way, He's with you. I heard a joke. I probably won't tell it very funny, but there's this poor elderly woman, and every morning she would go out and pray on her porch. Pray very loudly. One day she prayed, "Lord, I'm out of food, and I just trust that you're going to provide." Her next door neighbor was an atheist, and he mocked her faith constantly. And when he heard her prayer, he decided he's going to play a trick on her. So he went to the grocery store, bought several bags of food, and secretly left them on her porch during the night. The next morning, the woman opened the door and shouted, "Praise the Lord! God has provided!" And the atheist jumped out from behind the bushes laughing, "Ha! God didn't provide that. I brought those groceries." And the woman started praising even louder. "Praise the Lord, He provided, and He made the devil pay for it." Right? Sometimes God says, "Watch what I do." And sometimes God simply says, "Just keep obeying me." Sometimes He does the miraculous, and sometimes He works through people. But God is always working. But it requires our faith in Him. Whether we hear Him and see Him in the moment, and we can see these manifestations, we see the Jericho walls fall, God's in that. But you know what? He's also in quietly giving us strategy on how to attain victory as well. Joshua did something great at Ai, though. When confusion came, what did he do? He went to the presence of the Lord. When he didn't know what was going on, he didn't run from God. He fell on his face before the ark, and he asked the Lord, and God answered him with assurance. So maybe you're a person here today that you feel like you're standing at Ai. You remember past moments, maybe when God felt really close, when things felt really good. You remember those stronger seasons. You remember those breakthrough moments, and now you long for those, and you feel, "God, have I done something? Why am I not seeing you move the way you've moved in my life before?" Maybe you're in one of those quiet seasons, that Ai moment, wondering, "Where are you? Are you even with me?" But God, Joshua's story gives the answer to that. Yes, He's with you. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. The God of Jericho is the God of Ai. The God of the mountain top is the God of the valley. Psalm says He holds all of our times in His hand. That's our good times, our bad times, and sometimes we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Sometimes we've already made it through. Today is not a moment to run from God in discouragement. Today is a moment to do what Joshua did. Come to the Lord, ask of Him, seek His presence, remember His promises. Hear Him say to you again, "Fear not, do not be dismayed, for I am with you." What I'd like to do this morning is I want to take a moment for us. I want to take a moment to respond. If you're in that quiet season, it doesn't mean God's gone. I want us to think about our church. Are we seeing that big Jericho walls falling kind of moment in our church? Are we in a season for strategy? But here's the thing. If we don't tune our ears into the voice of the Lord and look on to what He said, we're going to miss out. If we're just expecting these big things to fall in front of our face and to prove, we're going to miss out. God has spoken to us. He's spoken to you in your life. And His word, it is true. And I want us to reflect. Where am I at? Where are you at today? There's a slide at the very end on our computer it's an altar time slide. There's a logo of the church and there's music on that. If you would hit that slide. So what I want to do is, I'm not looking for a big show today. What I want you to do, we have plenty of time. You know, it's 20 to 12. This is probably the quickest I've ever been getting out of here today, right? I want you to take a moment. You can stay where you are if you want to. You can get out and come around the front. But I just want you to take a moment to talk to the Lord. Say, Lord, what moment? Is this a quiet season? Do I need strategy? Maybe you are in these big miraculous moments. Then take this moment to thank Him. But I want you to reflect on what God has spoken to you in your life, and maybe you haven't seen it come true yet, but to remember and be encouraged. And I want you to think about our church, what God has spoken over this church, and if we have not seen that come to pass yet, that the Lord isn't a God that He should lie. And I want us to remember what He has promised, and I want us to take this time as a moment of encouragement just to let the Lord speak to you. Again, I'm not looking for hype. I just want His voice. So can we just take a few moments and seek the Lord?